Elizabeth Holmes walked into a room and convinced the smartest investors in Silicon Valley that she'd solved blood testing. And they believed her without ever asking to see the machine work. Now you might think, surely someone checked. Surely a venture capitalist who'd made millions spotting fraud would run basic due diligence. And you'd be right to think that. The problem is, Holmes didn't let them. She built a wall of secrecy so complete, so deliberately impenetrable, that the very act of asking questions became seen as a sign of weakness, a failure to get the vision. Exhibit 1, the Edison machine. Holmes claimed it could run a full panel of blood tests from a single finger prick, a genuine breakthrough if true. But here's what the investors didn't see. The machine barely worked. It was temperamental, unreliable, and produced wildly inconsistent results. Yet Theranos sent out reports from that machine to real patients, doctors, and hospitals anyway. The counterargument sounds reasonable. Startups iterate, they fail forward. Maybe early prototypes don't work, that's normal. Except Theranos wasn't testing the device in a lab with volunteers who'd signed consent forms. They were running it on actual patients seeking actual medical results. That's not iteration. That's fraud with a human cost. Exhibit 2, the fake pharmaceutical endorsements. Theranos released promotional materials suggesting that major drug companies, Pfizer, Novartis, Walgreens, had validated the Edison technology and were using it. They hadn't. Theranos fabricated these partnerships wholesale. When confronted, the company claimed miscommunication. When the evidence mounted, they blamed junior staff. The defense offered at the time was almost casual. These were marketing oversights, not criminal intent. But oversights don't happen in multiple memos, across different departments, signed by senior executives. Deliberate deception looks exactly like this, is systematic, layered, and documented. Exhibit 3, the investment pitch itself. Holmes presented a company that was already generating massive revenue. She showed a growth curve that would make any analyst weep with envy. Theranos claimed it was running tests in Walgreens locations across the country. All of this was either wildly exaggerated or completely false. Here's where the psychology breaks your brain. When you're pitching to billionaires, you're not pitching to people who fact-check meticulously. You're pitching to people who have made their fortunes by trusting their gut, moving fast, and assuming that diligence happens downstream. Holmes understood this. She weaponized it. Exhibit 4, the board itself. Theranos assembled a collection of names so heavyweight, former secretaries of state, retired generals, pharmaceutical titans, that questioning the company felt like questioning authority itself. These weren't tech nerds who'd read the fine print. Many barely understood blood testing. They were ornamental. The argument for their innocence is straightforward. They trusted the CEO. They relied on management to handle operations. But that's precisely the problem. A board exists to ask hard questions. Theranos' board asked almost none. When they did, they were ignored or misdirected. Exhibit 5, the whistleblowers. Tyler Shultz, a young engineer, started noticing that the Edison machine was producing garbage results. He flagged it internally. Instead of investigation, he was threatened with lawsuits. His family was pressured. When he went to regulators, Theranos' legal team came after him with everything they had. Some might say, whistleblowers are disgruntled employees, they have axes to grind. Maybe Shultz was a poor fit for the company culture. Maybe he didn't understand the vision, except his concerns were technical. They were measurable, and every single one of them turned out to be completely accurate. Exhibit 6, the regulatory blind spot. The FDA and Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services failed to inspect Theranos' Newark lab with any real rigor for years. When they finally did, they found dozens of critical violations. But by then, Theranos had already processed hundreds of thousands of patient tests. Real people got real results that were potentially wrong. The counterargument is that regulatory agencies are understaffed and underfunded. That's true, but it's also why transparency matters so much. Theranos actively obstructed what little oversight existed. They misrepresented their capabilities to regulators. That's not a gap in the system. That's criminal abuse of it. So here's what we've established. Holmes built a company on a technology that didn't work. She lied about its capabilities. She fabricated partnerships. She intimidated whistleblowers. She misled investors, doctors, and patients. And she did it all while portraying herself as the next Steve Jobs, a visionary too brilliant to be constrained by conventional rules. The psychology here is worth examining. Holmes was brilliant at reading what people wanted to believe. Silicon Valley wanted disruption. Investors wanted the next unicorn. Patients wanted a painless solution to blood tests. She offered all of it. What she didn't offer was anything real. In 2022, Holmes was convicted of fraud. She was sentenced to over 11 years in prison. Theranos shut down. The company that was once valued at $9 billion was worth zero. Investors lost everything. Patients who relied on inaccurate test results faced real medical consequences. And one person's carefully constructed lie took all of it down. The lesson isn't that we should never trust innovators or that all entrepreneurs are liars. The lesson is sharper. When someone tells you not to look under the hood, when they build walls instead of transparency, when they punish questions instead of answering them, that's not confidence in their vision. That's the architecture of a con. And the smartest people in the room fell for it, not because they were stupid, but because they weren't paying attention to what she wasn't showing them. Deception thrives in the gaps between what's claimed and what's verifiable. Theranos was all gaps. Subscribe to catch the next fraud that fooled the experts, because the best cons always hide in plain sight.